This is Mallory. There is currently no one here except myself because it's still 8 minutes to go until our awesome program starts. So until then, I'm just going to be testing some things out and hanging out and probably awkwardly staring at the screen. But I hope to see y'all in 8 minutes. So just sit tight, and I will also sit tight. Okay, so it is hitting, well, 12 here. Not sure where it is where you are. We're going to wait another minute and get started. Just to make sure everyone can find their way here and rush on over from their last session. So just give it one more minute. And then we'll get crack-a-lackin'. And I can see the chat window, but I don't know if y'all can, and if it's working for you. So one thing we did last session, because not everyone could see the chat window, and I want to get everybody involved in seeing everything, is people just went ahead and typed in comments into the question and answer boxes, and that worked out pretty well last time. So I think we're going to go ahead and do that again. So if you have comments or questions throughout the presentation, you can go ahead and post those in the question and answer section. So, all right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So for anyone who missed the last presentation on gamifying assessment, I'm Mallory. I'm doing my best. The gauntlet has been thrown down that I'm super chipper and energetic as your late night dose of energy. So that's what I'm going to try to do for you. So this session is benefits and challenges of game-based learning. So if you are in the right place, good job. If you're in the wrong place, stay. Because I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And because you guys stayed up later and came to the session and everything, in return for you being here later, I promise to, I'm throwing my own challenge. I want you guys to walk away from this session with a game that you can try and a game that you can look into for your own classroom. So I'm going to make sure that I have my nice mental library of games and can recommend something for you to try to use. So let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, so my beautiful face will disappear for a little bit. Sorry to deprive you of that, but I figure you probably want to see the presentation more. Okay, so sweet, you can see my screen. We're going to go ahead and present. So welcome to benefits and, presenting. Thought that worked, but guess it did not. There we go. All right. So welcome to benefits and challenges of game-based learning. Part of the reason I wanted to do this session was that a lot of times I hear us talking about the benefits of game-based learning, which there's a myriad, so it's great that we talk about them, but we don't always talk about some of the challenges to it, or it's kind of hush-hush. So better to face those head on and have some answers for them. So that's partly why we are doing this session tonight. For anyone who missed my little intro in the beginning, the way that our questions and answers and comments are going to work is I don't know if everyone can see the chat. So if you want to go ahead and post any comments you have, or when I ask you questions, any answers to those questions, please post those in the question and answer section. All right. So my name's Mallory. I am an English teacher at Walnut Hills High School in Cincinnati, Ohio. Last year, I taught 8th grade English at Logan Hocking Middle School in Logan, Ohio, which is about 3 hours east and a lot more rural than Cincinnati. I am also the founder of Game Index, which I will be talking about a bit tonight, because on Game Index, we review games for education use. So we'll review anything from one of our reviews coming up is Call of Duty to games such as, we'll even do like Math Blasters and more like education focused games and everything. But we always try to find the educational value in any game and give you ideas on how to use it in your classroom. So you can find me at Mallory Kesson, which quite a few of you have. Or if you want more information on game-based learning, on Game Index, or anything you see tonight, you can email me at MalloryKesson@GameIndex.org. Okay, so my first question for you is I want to know a little bit about the people who are here. So what is your subject area? What is your grade level or your range of grades that you teach? And what's your experience with games in education? Because that's going to possibly change the conversation we have tonight. If we have people who are more new to game-based learning, I want to give you some of that introduction. If we have people who maybe are more veterans with it, I want to get down to the nitty-gritty, the stuff that makes us tick, and the stuff that makes game-based learning game-based learning. So if you can go ahead and take a minute to type your answers in the question and answer section, that would be great. So what is your subject area? What is your grade level or your range of grades? And what is your experience with games in education? And this can get me thinking about the game I'm going to recommend to you later on. Hello, latest viewer who just jumped in. If you can go ahead and answer these questions, that would be great. Just answer in the question and answer section. Hey, Coach Steele, 7th grade science. Nice. And you started, oh, good. I'll have to talk to you a bit about the games you use then for science. That would be great to get some input on. It's always that awkward waiting game of the typing. Howdy, Carrie. 4th grade teacher, all subjects, nice, and brand new to gaming. Good to know. ELA, there we go. 6th grade ELA, also going to teach 8th grade Spanish, nice, and Heritage Spanish. What is Heritage Spanish? Is it more specific to people who are already speaking Spanish? I'm not as familiar. Sorry. Oh, very nice, Lisa. You can be our Minecraft EDU expert. Pre-K to adult computer science and curriculum development use games all the time. All right, so it sounds like we got a pretty good range of people who, actually, it sounds like you guys are kind of like on both ends. You either are brand new to gaming or you use games all the time. So what I'm going to ask then is there people who have been using games all the time? I would love it if you could be some of our experts in this conversation. So as we go through, if you have anything you want to add, please feel free to just add it in as a comment in that nice little question and answer section. As we go through our presentation, I'm mostly going to just run through it. And then at the end, if you have questions, I will answer those. So I'll go back through the list and find your question. So if I'm still talking after you answer a question, don't think I ignored you. I'm just carrying on. All right, so first thing we got to get established, and this is the thing I always establish when I talk about game-based learning or games in education or anything like that. What on earth is game-based learning? So game-based learning is using games, either digital or tabletop, as materials for the basis of learning. A couple things to clarify. When I say tabletop, that means things like imagine playing Monopoly or playing Uno or playing Clue. Those kind of games, like board games, dice games, card games. There's recently been a renaissance of tabletop games that are more creative and fit very well into education, and I've actually used them a bit in my classroom. Meanwhile, Gamification, which I talked about in an earlier session, is applying game principles, points, rewards, levels, to traditionally non-game settings. It's really important we establish there's a difference between the two. Sometimes they're used interchangeably, but they really mean two different things. The best way I tell people to think of this is think about your classroom, your traditional classroom. A traditional classroom is textbook-based learning, for example, or book-based learning. You use the textbook, you use the book, and that's the basis for where your learning is coming from. You don't, however, take that and apply those things to how your class is set up, how your culture is set up. I would like to think that your class culture is more warm and inviting than a textbook. So, another way to put it into concrete terms, using games like Gone Home, Plague Inc. Involved, Civilization as the basis for an English, science, or history classroom, game-based learning. You're using that as a text for what you're doing. Using things like Class Dojo, 3D Game Lab, Classcraft to enhance the environment of your class or how your class is set up is gamification. Two different things. So tonight we're talking about game-based learning. So what are some teachers doing with it? So we had a couple teachers talked a little bit earlier about, Lisa talked about using Minecraft EDU. And it's something that's relatively new to the scene, and I hope is a good trend for gaming companies to push their way a little bit into education and to come into education. So Minecraft is probably the big one that if someone says game-based learning or games in education, that's probably one of the first games that comes to mind. There have been teachers that have used it as a virtual space. There are teachers who use it to set up, for example, what the globe might have looked like and have students walk through it and explore it. There's teachers who will use it to run experiments in a science class, for example. A couple of other games that have been used in education. Teaching with Portals is a series of lesson plans that are mostly science specific for using the game Portal in the classroom and talk a lot about physics, a lot about engineering, and even give ways for students to create their own levels. Gone Home is a really big one in English for teaching narrative and for teaching character development through means other than just talking straight to the character. Very beautiful game. Game Index on the site, we actually do reviews of these different games and provide ideas for how you can use them in your classroom. So very briefly, I'll just show you an example. So on our site, you can search for a game. You can also see what our newest reviews are. You can search by your subject area. For example, one of our newest ones is Pokemon. You can see images of the game, who developed it, how much, what content areas. So surprisingly, Pokemon can actually be used in English, math, and science. And then we will actually give you ideas for how you could use it in the classroom. So for example, Pokemon is a perfect example of hero's journey. And it's an example that a lot of students would be familiar with. So last year in my own class, I used game-based learning, and I used it in a couple ways. One, I planned, but didn't get to implement because in the book rotation shuffle, we lost the chance to read A Long Walk to Water. But I planned Against All Odds, which is a game that puts students in the mindset of being a refugee who has to escape their country and flee to a new one and try to survive the odds. A Long Walk to Water is about a boy escaping the Sudan and becoming a refugee and trying to find safety again. My students in rural Ohio had no idea where the Sudan was, had no idea what it would mean to be a refugee. So using Against All Odds as a way for them to play through that experience gave them a way to experience it without putting them in danger or without taking the time to really have to try to get them to understand what it would feel like for this character. The game that we really used last year that was a big hit was when we read Midsummer Night's Dream. We played the Stanley Parable. If you have not had the chance to play the Stanley Parable and you're really into gaming, play it. So good. Such a great experience. So a little bit about what we did in our class. The Stanley Parable is about a man named Stanley who works at a company where he pushes buttons all day. And one day he goes to work, but he gets no orders of what buttons to push. And so he leaves and finds out that his coworkers are nowhere to be found, and he has to follow the narrator's story of how he discovers what happened to his coworkers. The exciting part is that the player can actually choose if they're going to listen to the narrator or not. If they opt not to listen to the narrator, then the narrator will usually scramble to find some explanation for what Stanley's doing. If they listen to the narrator, then the narrator's a happy guy who's just happy with Stanley listening to the story. The way we tied it into Midsummer Night Dream was we would talk about how there were issues of control and happiness in Midsummer Night's Dream. So who's really happy in the play? Who's really in control of what's going on? Same with Stanley Parable. We would talk about, is Stanley happy the way he is? Who's really in control of what's going on with Stanley? What's really happening? Is the player in control? Is the narrator in control? We talked about if the narrator was an antagonist. We talked about what the internal and external conflicts were, all these different things. And they were all things that tied into our discussion of Shakespeare. So it was a way for students to be able to relate to the themes that we were studying in Shakespeare, but it was still a way that was accessible for them. So this is a shot of between bells, what my class looked like when we were playing the Stanley Parable. So up on the screen, we had the game itself, and so it was just played up there so everyone in class could see it. Something unique about Stanley Parable is that you could play through it multiple times within a 40-minute class period, 60-minute class period. We played through about 5 different endings in each class. So you had the game up on the screen, and then over here, as you can see, there's a desk in the middle. That was the hot seat. That hot seat has a wireless mouse and a wireless keyboard. So every playthrough, a student would have a chance to be Stanley, and they would play through what was going on while the rest of the class was watching. The rest of the class was not bored. They were thoroughly engaged, even though they weren't the ones playing it. So they were engaged in what was going on, and were usually giving recommendations on if the person should listen to the narrator or not, or what they should do next, so on and so forth. It was really successful in our class. It was a really great day for all the students. So what were some of the benefits that both I saw that day and of game-based learning in general? So first off is student interest. Students are interested in games. It's what they do in their free time, whether tabletop or digital or playing outside. They're interested in gaming, and it grabs them and it pulls them in. Games are also interactive and engaging. If you read a book or if you watch a movie, you really have no say in what's happening. You have no say in what's going on there. You have no way of interacting with typically no way of interacting with the characters. But in a video game, you have the chance to do that. You have the chance to really own what's going on. Students also become experts. I knew I had gamers in my class. I knew I had people who loved gaming in my class when we started playing Stanley Parable. And so we ended up, a few days before, I was hinting at the fact that we were going to play a video game. And the kids asked me what it was and were begging to know. So I dropped a couple hints to my gamers. And I said, oh, well, it's this game called Stanley Parable. Have you heard of it? First thing they did was they jumped on their phones or they jumped on the computer and they looked up what it was, and they started checking it out, and they started kind of strategizing and figuring out what it was about. Which meant that when we got to the day that we were doing it, when half the class was like, I don't know about this game, the gamers jumped in and said, no, I watched it. It looks awesome. I know what to do. It's going to be great. And they felt like they were really experts. And a lot of those kids were the ones that were typically not engaged in class or were not as interested in English, but they were happy to be experts on the game. Also teaching 21st century skills, especially as some games will work with students to teach coding or will allow them to make modifications to the game. Allows for cross-curricular opportunities. Very few games are specifically just one subject and can't be applied to another, especially when it comes to like math and science, or if it comes to English and history. There's a lot of ways that they can cross over. Games also erase fear of failure. When our kids played Stanley Parable, there's one ending where Stanley makes it out okay. One. And there's a myriad of other endings where Stanley has a bad ending. The kids were so excited to just see what happened. They didn't care if they failed the game. They just wanted to see what came next. They wanted to know what was going to happen. And if they did fail, then they realized, okay, that's something that we don't do next time, we move on. But there was no fear of failure there. There was a sense of, my science people, there was a sense of let's experiment, let's find out, let's see what's going to happen. And that's exciting to see. It also teaches interpersonal skills, and it can work on that. Again, books and movies are, I love them dearly, but they're very individual activities. Movies maybe you can talk about, books you can maybe talk about, but when you're in the middle of doing it, it's a very individual activity. When we were playing the games in my class, students were constantly giving each other advice. Kids who had played Stanley before were helping out the other students with how the controls worked. They were constantly talking about the game, about what was going on, about their theories, everything. So they were constantly working together. And when they play games, they usually listen to each other as well. When my kids had played the tabletop games and had to listen to the directions and had to listen to what other people were saying on their turns, it was beautiful because kids who normally didn't care what another person had to say were really listening to what was going on. Also can help them out with research skills. So in those research skills, what I mean is if a kid gets stuck, and I can speak to this too as a game player, if I get stuck on a game, I will try my hardest to figure it out, but eventually you try to go find the answer. You try to go find a way to see what you're doing wrong. So it improves research skills in that students can both research the game itself, they can research what's being said about it, and they can practice looking into what are credible sources of what's the best way to approach this game. So a number of benefits for gaming and education. Now this is the tricky part. Challenges. And I kind of feel like we have a difficult time talking about the challenges. Game-based learning and games and education is something that I get so passionate about, I know. And most of the people that I talk to about it get so excited about and passionate about that we talk about the good things. But we have to acknowledge, too, there are some challenges with it. And if we don't acknowledge those challenges, we can't approach them head on, and we can't find ways to be proactive about it. All we're left doing is being reactive. So I just have 5 main challenges that I usually hear and that I've seen be barriers in trying to implement games in my own classroom. So the first one is, I don't have the money. Games can get expensive, especially if you're trying to get a class set. I don't have the money. I don't have the time. Games can take a long time to play. I don't have the support from administrators or community. So if you have administrators or parents who think that it's a waste of time, or I had a parent who was worried that their kid was just going to be sitting in front of a computer screen all day and I wasn't actually teaching, that can be a problem. I don't have the technological support. 2 years ago, I would not have been able to implement some of these games based on the school that I was in and the support that they had. And finally, I can't find a game that meets my needs. So especially for people who are brand new to games and education, who maybe don't know where to turn to find those games, this is something that can be a really big barrier and can feel really daunting. So let's do this. Let's tackle these. First up, I don't have the money. Highly recommend Donors Choose. On Donors Choose, you can set up your essentially a grant or a proposal for what you're going to do with the money. This link takes you to Steve Isaac's wonderful page for how he has gotten all of his funding for games and education. He has raised thousands of dollars through Donors Choose for his games, for his students. So it is highly possible. Highly recommend using Donors Choose for it. Another way you can find money, nonprofits that help underprivileged students in the Cincinnati area. We have Crayons to Computers, but nonprofits can help you out, especially if you're in an underserved area. Can help you out with getting funding for some of those items. There are also free web browser-based games. Against All Odds, the game I mentioned earlier, is a free game that is just played in your web browser. Doesn't matter what type of computer you have, doesn't matter if you're on a phone, anything, you can just pull it up on your web browser. And finally, if you haven't heard of Steam, and I don't mean the STEM with the arts. If you haven't heard of the company Steam, highly recommend you check them out. Steam is a company that you can buy games through and have a digital library of games, so you never have to worry about physical copies. And they frequently have really good sales on games. The numbers there, $172 on 32 games. Don't tell my parents, they would kill me, but that is the amount that I spent for 32 games on a summer sale that they had. They typically have a large summer sale and a large Christmas or wintertime sale. But $172 for 32 games came to about $5 per game. And that included some really big heavy hitters that normally cost like $50, $60. So highly recommend checking out Steam for if you have any issues with paying for games. So that kind of helps with I don't have the money. What about the time? What if you don't have the time to play these games? Cross-curricular games, team up. In games like Valiant Hearts, not only do students learn more about World War I in the first 5 minutes of the game than they could ever learn in a textbook, but they also practice so much reading of nonfiction that could easily be paired up between history and English. So they could take a day or two in both classes and just play through the game, and then they have a wealth of knowledge and a great resource for discussing both the storyline for an English class and the historical context and what was going on for history. So get those cross-curricular games, team up with teachers. Games for Education also have a very large focus on lesson length. So the games that are made specifically for teaching something, for example, Against All Odds, it was meant to be played in 45 minutes. A game like Spent, which can be used in a math class or a social studies class, Spent can be played 15, 20 minutes. So look at the games that are made for education and for teaching something, because they're usually a much shorter time frame than the games that are made typically for entertainment. One-to-one school, homework, especially if you got things like those Chromebooks. BYOD, homework. Find games that are cross-platform. Platform is just the system that you play it on. Find games that are cross-platform and assign those for homework. And also on our site, we do provide a time estimated to play the game. So how long it takes for you to beat it. You can also look up games by if they're a short length, a longer length, a medium length. For example, if you want to use a video game as a text, the way that you would use a short story, you might want one of those medium games. So there are ways to combat the issue of not having enough time to run through a game. I don't have the technology support. This is the entire reason that I really became dedicated to finding ways around these challenges, because 2 years ago I was in a school system where there really wasn't a whole lot of technology support. So what are some ways around it? Tabletop games, hands down. One Night Ultimate Werewolf is an example of one of those games, but you don't need internet connection, you don't need to have a certain computer, you don't need to have it updated. You have a game that is physically right in front of you that you can rely on to be there. So use tabletop games. And oftentimes you can you can have a number of players at one time in those games. Think Werewolf, you can have 10 to 13 at a time, which is great. Again, those web browser games that are typically free are also easy if you don't have the access to a specific kind of computer, or if you don't have access to a certain gaming console or something. The web browser games can be very nice for that. Find games that cross platforms. So Valiant Hearts, for example, can be played on Apple, can be played on PC, can be played on Android, can be played on iOS. So right there, that covers a great number of students. So even if students don't have like the computer at home, they might have like a phone that they can use to check out the game. Plague Inc. also is very similar to that. Finally, concentrate it on one computer and have the whole class experience the game. It's exactly what I did for Stanley Parable. I knew I did not have enough technology support to download Steam onto all the computers and then download the game onto all our computers. Plus, we had Apple, which doesn't work with Stanley Parable. So I had my PC, and I connected it to that front screen, and the whole class experienced the game together instead of it being an individual experience for everybody. So those are a couple ways that you can fight that technology support problem. Okay, this is a really big one. So what if you don't have the support from your administration or your community? Open door policy. Allow administrators to sit in on your lessons or see your plans. So give them the opportunity to see that, you know, nothing sinister is going on here with having your game-based lessons. Start with tabletop games. It's a lot easier for people to accept using tabletop games that they're more familiar with the format of into a classroom than it is for them to see how you'd use video games in the classroom. So start with tabletop games that people are more familiar with, that they trust a little bit more, and then build your way up to those video games. You can share resources that support game-based learning. I have a number of them. If you feel like you're in this situation or you just want to learn more, let me know. On our site, we also do have a Why Games in Education section, and there are a number of great books that you can check out as well. And finally, this kind of ties into the first one, but be upfront about why you're using games. I'm all about you should be proactive, you should be honest, and you should be open about what's going on, because, you know, honesty is the best policy, especially if people feel like you're trying to go behind their back and do things, or if people get anxious about that. The fact that I was open and honest with my administration about using those games with my students really helped out when there were parent concerns, because the parents would go straight to like the principals. So just be completely honest. All right. And our final big problem, I don't know how to get started. I can't find a game that matches what I want and what I need. Not to be a broken record, but on Game Index, we do have game reviews and ideas for what you can do. So if you are brand new to games in education and game-based learning, you can use those reviews as a basis for what are some ways I could bring that game into the classroom. Ask your students. Like I said earlier, game-based learning can be really big and really great for making students feel like they're experts in something and making them feel like their interests matter and that you are interested in what's going on. So I guarantee you will have at least one gamer in your class who could talk day and night about the games they play. And not only will that let them feel like experts, but it'll build a relationship and it'll build a bridge that can help you out throughout the year, and something that can help them out as well. So ask your students. Play, 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 play. The best way to get started on understanding games, understanding gamers, understanding how to use games in education is to play. So pick a game, any game, doesn't have to be related to your subject area, and just start playing. Get used to playing games, get used to being around games and talking about games and understanding how they work. And that'll help you with using games in your classroom. And if you're interested in gamification of applying game principles to your class, the best thing you can do for yourself to help you out with that is playing games to get used to game principles. And finally, how about right now? There is no time like the present. So what I actually have for you are, I have a series of games that I highly recommend for trying out. On this slide, all of these games I recommend for use in education. A couple of them have a little bit more mature things in it. So if you teach kindergarten, please don't just grab a game and show it to your kindergartners the next day. Make sure you check out the game. I always recommend that. Don't just go in blind to what game you're using. But all of these games could be used in education. Portal, Kerbal, Shelter, all great for teaching science. Child of Light, Life is Strange, Valiant Hearts, great for teaching English. Valiant Hearts again, Civilization, Guillotine, great for teaching history. On our next page, Plague Inc., Never Alone, both excellent for teaching science. Papers, Please, and Spent, both very good for teaching social studies. For my math people, I didn't leave you out. Game Dev Tycoon and Plague Inc. Evolved are both excellent and Spent are all three excellent ways to use games in math learning. Game Dev Tycoon, they can actually even like create their own business, and you could have them continue that as a project. Papo and Yo is beautiful for teaching narrative, and for my Spanish people, it's also very beautiful, and it's Brazilian, but it's a great South American story too, to watch and to read and to listen to. So all of these are excellent games to be used in education. I would highly recommend all of them. I could easily talk to you about implementing them in your classroom if you want as well. I want to know now, what other challenges do you see in game-based learning? And especially my experienced people, what are some ways that you have for overcoming those challenges? So what are some other challenges that you see besides the 5 that I mentioned? And while you guys are typing, Matt said that the Wikipedia says there's a Mac version of Stanley Parable. Yes, it says it, but in actuality, for some reason, it doesn't work. So the only version that works is the PC version. So just to clear that up real quick. So what are some other challenges that you see, or if you have other ways to overcome the challenges we've talked about, what are they? Okay, so Brittany talked about she has issues finding grade level appropriate games for primary students. That can be really challenging, especially for the games that are made for entertainment, because they are typically made for the older students. There are still games that you can use. A great site to check out to find games like that, and to find games that are free and education focused. If you go to gamesforchange.org, they're very good at separating the games that are made for younger students or games that can be good for them as well. So I highly recommend that. Okay, if those are all the challenges we can think of, then the last thing I have is if there are any questions, and that includes if you would like to talk for a minute and get a recommendation of a game to use, I am more than happy to help you out with finding those games that you can use. Now, if you ask me, like, I would like a game that teaches about epithelial cells or something, I cannot give you that. Biology I can do. Epithelial cells I cannot. So I would be happy to talk to you about that. If you want to head to bed, because I know it's late for everybody, you can also check out our site, gameindex.org, later. Thank you very much for your patience and your participation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see my beautiful face, and I can read any questions that you might have. Or if you would like a recommended game to try out, let me know. I cannot promise that it will be great. Like, it will work perfectly for your classroom because everybody has different needs, so on and so forth. But I will do my best. I haven't failed so far. Okay, so Matt said that he is interested in games relevant to middle school, especially math. So Matt, some of the games that I would recommend you check out. For some of a social angle, I would recommend Spent, which is students are given $1,000 for the month, and they're left to see if they can survive for the month on $1,000. I would also recommend business simulation games such as Game Developer Tycoon, which lets them run their own company and manage where they're investing money, manage their profits, things like that. So highly recommend that as well. So I hope that helps you out a little bit with those 2 recommendations for middle school math. And if not, let me know, and I will try to help you out more. So if you would like any recommendations, please just let me know. Otherwise, or if you have any questions at all, I am more than happy to answer them. They could be questions about game-based learning, gamification, anything that I've discussed at some point tonight. Please just let me know. Otherwise, I hope you have a lovely EdCamp Global Conference, and I hope I get to see you guys around in some other sessions as well. So thank you so much. I will be here for any questions, or if you want a game recommended, just say, hey, I'd like a game recommended. I can do that for you. One challenge that I noticed someone mentioned was if a game is internet-based and the internet connection isn't strong or goes down, that could be an issue. And yes, is my main answer to that. It absolutely can be an issue and everything. My recommendation is to talk to your tech team at your school and your tech support and see if there's a way that you can work on that. Another way to be easier on the network is if you put students into partners or teams, so not so many people are on the internet at one time. That can help stop it from being dragged down so much. Dawn, the list of games I recommended, they're all on Game Index. And the website is gameindex.org. I can post a link to it with EdCamp Global after this session. You can also follow Game Index and get updates on when our next reviews are. The Twitter handle is just at Game Index, no first E, so GAM Index. But all of the games that I recommended are up there, and they have the ideas for how you could use them in your classroom. And there's also a myriad of others. We're about to hit 50 reviews that we've done total. You're welcome, Matt. Happy to help. Also, Dawn, I just thought about this. I hope you're still watching. If not, I'll flag you down later. But for your Spanish class, there are some games that are not language-based, especially tabletop games that are made in Europe, because there's so many different language speakers there. A lot of times you don't necessarily need the language, a specific language to play the game. So two games that could be really helpful. One is Hanabi, which is a firework making game, and it just requires players to have like a basic group understanding of colors and numbers. So that could be good for helping out Spanish 1, is that they can practice their colors and numbers by playing this game. And for either for Spanish 1 or you could up it to for your heritage Spanish, the game Dixit has cards with these beautiful pictures on them, and players have to give a clue about what their card is without being too obvious about it. It's the best way I can describe it. It's kind of like a very artistic version of Apples to Apples. So I really recommend those. And if you get a chance, I think that you would also really like, just from kind of a cultural side, check into Papo and Yo, and check into Toren, Toren. Are both really good games, Latino games. Barb mentioned that it's difficult to get funding for Catholic or faith-based schools. I wish I could help you out with that. I don't have as much experience with the faith-based schools, except that, I went to one in elementary school. But that's where I would really recommend looking into some of those free games then, or ones that you can access that maybe cost less. Sometimes if you talk to developers, like go straight to them and tell them that you're a teacher interested in using their game, they can give you at least a discount. Not always, but it's something worth looking into if you want. Oh, and Carrie's mention of being in all subjects made me think of this one game too for English language arts that is really good, and one that I will be using this year in my classroom. Fingers crossed. Is Elegy for a Dead World, and it sounds really like fancy and like hard and stuff, I guess. But basically, what it is students are put into the role of an astronaut who is exploring a long forgotten world. And they're exploring it, and as they explore, they have to tell the story of what happened to these people. So the worlds are based on different poets, so you can incorporate poetry from those poets. Percy Shelley, Keats, and Byron, I think, are the ones that are featured. But it also gives students a way to be writers themselves and to be content creators. And for the English as a second language teachers, or for just English teachers trying to teach grammar, they actually have sections too that are helpful for correcting grammar and things like that. So I think that answers just about everybody. Barbie, you are absolutely right in Donors Choose making it happen for everybody. For many, not everybody, but for many people. I'm really looking forward to using it for getting some games together myself and things to help me out. So if there are, I will hang out for a little bit longer, but if there are no more questions, then just, enjoy your time. Matt, you can't find spent on Google. Really? Huh. Um, Stanley Parable does require Steam, doesn't require Half-Life, but it requires Steam. You might be thinking Half-Life because Steam is by Valve, who also does Half-Life. Spent, you should be able to. Okay. what you can do is go to playspent.org, and that'll take you straight to the game. So that should help you out. So if you still can't find it, though, let me know, because that is surprising. Like that, yeah. So playspent.org. You are welcome, Carrie. Happy to help. If you're interested in poetry in your classroom too, I still highly recommend Torin, because a lot of it's a pretty short game, but a lot of the text that you see in there is poetry, which is really, really interesting too. And you're all welcome for recommendations and everything. Happy to help. This is my passion. It's what I love to do. Also, totally forgot to mention this earlier. Probably should have when, everybody was tuning in. But this also goes for people who are tuning in later. So if you missed the session and you're now watching, for Game Index, we are looking for people who are have some knowledge beyond just like teaching English language, like normal English, to help us out with writing some reviews for other content areas, or for writing articles about game-based learning for other subject areas. So if you would be interested, or if you know anyone else who would be interested, please hit me up. I would appreciate that a lot, very much. So if you like this kind of talk, message me. Okay, my dedicated 4 viewers. It looks like we have about 7 minutes left. 5 viewers now. I'm going to turn that time back to you, because it doesn't seem to be any more questions. So thank you so much for tuning in. Oh, yay! Matt got the game to work. It didn't look like a game at first. It is browser based, which is helpful. So yeah, enjoy playing Spent. Only takes like 15 minutes, and it breaks your heart every time. So with that being said, if you would like to continue the talk about game-based learning, please, you can reach me at Mallory Kesson or at Game Index. I will be posting the link to the site shortly. If you want any other help with game-based learning, or if you feel like you run into any other challenges, please talk to me about it. I love this, and I love doing this. So with that being said, have a great night. Have fun at EdCamp Global, and thank you for tuning in. Night, guys.